What is good, Tesla family? It's Ray J back with another video, and in this one I want to break down what's going on with Tesla, SPY, Nvda, the QQQ, and a couple of other tickers. I'm going to break down what the news is saying about Tesla when it comes to its deliveries and other things like that. Also, what's happening with all these different charts as we're seeing some new developments looking at the day. But before I break into double this information, before I get into any more details, let me just mention a couple of things. Firstly, I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out the Moomoo link, which is down below and in the description. If you sign up for Moomoo and deposit $100 into the account, you are guaranteed up to 5 free stocks. If you deposit $1,000, you're guaranteed up to 15 free stocks. This offer ends very soon, so check it out before they run out. Anyways, let's break down what's going on with the market. Looking at Tesla, we saw a very, very boring day. Tesla had this falling wedge, which suggests that there could have been some move to the upside, especially after deliveries came out. And we did make an attempt to bounce out of this, try to break out, but unfortunately, deliveries were not as great as what many of these investors wanted it to be. So many investors expect Tesla to just absolutely shatter expectations, not just barely beat them by a few thousand deliveries. And it wasn't really enough to cause Tesla to really break out. So it's not entirely Tesla's fault. Tesla actually did well, though. Don't let that change your mind. The fact that it didn't get a massive run, Tesla still did very, very well. But one issue that ended up happening was we had some issues involving Chinese regulations, other issues involving tariffs and things like that, which weren't so positive for many Chinese tickers and also for Tesla. And we saw the market sell off a little bit, which ended up affecting Tesla. And then on top of that, I just want to call out that the mainstream media ended up just kind of bashing Tesla today when it came to their deliveries. I want to break down exactly why that was and then what this means for the share price, at least moving forward. Let's first talk about some data. As a reminder, for tomorrow, we have more data coming out at 10 o'clock a.m. Eastern Standard Time. We have the JOLTS job openings report coming out. This is going to be very important. We want this to be between 8.75 to 8.85 million. We also have the job quits coming out. So watch for all of this data that's coming out. We also have the manufacturing PMI and data like that. The manufacturing numbers and the jobs numbers are coming out at 10 o'clock a.m. Watch for volatility at that time. Then after that, for the whole market at 2 o'clock p.m., we have the FOMC minutes. This is going to be very important. So the FOMC minutes is not the FOMC meeting as a reminder. It is simply just a report which is going to go over more details, more data about what these Fed officials are saying, what they're doing. So watch that very carefully as well. There's going to be a big move most likely at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So watch for volatility at these times. Those are the main pieces of data coming out for the entire market. For the Fear and Greed Index, this is still technically at extreme greed. Let me just see if this updated technically is updated, but the market is becoming less greedy and getting closer to just greed. It's becoming less extremely greedy and closer to just a greed in itself. And overall, we're seeing some momentum slowing down, especially for tech as Apple sold off quite a bit. I'm going to be watching to see what the reaction is for tomorrow. As far as Tesla ended up doing, I just want to call out that Tesla did very well when it comes to deliveries. I went over more details in my earlier video. We had 1.81 million deliveries overall for 2023. The numbers right here for everything. We had a good amount of cars that were produced. And for Q4, we had just under 485,000 deliveries, which is still not bad for Tesla. What this means is overall, okay, Tesla technically beat by a little bit, a tiny bit. There's a small little beat on guidance, which is not bad whatsoever. It wasn't a massive beat, which would have caused Tesla to just run to the upside. It wasn't like that. They just barely beat. But overall, guys, the numbers were not bad. That's the important thing, because in 2023, we're up at 38% year over year. And we're also up about 35% year over year for production. That was for deliveries, by the way. So deliveries are up 38% year over year, and production is up 35%, which is not bad whatsoever for Tesla. But here's where the issues emerge. And we had some problems that ended up affecting Tesla. I first want to mention this news. So this actually affected lots of Chinese EVs. They ended up dropping despite having some strong numbers. NIO had nothing but good news for itself. NIO announced very strong deliveries that beat expectations. So did XPeng and Li Auto. Li Auto had very strong looking deliveries as well. And yet Li Auto was down 7%. XPeng was down 4%. NIO was down 7%. Why did they end up dropping? Because of politics, geopolitical issues, and also some changes to potential economic policies that could end up affecting them when it comes to tariffs and such. So this was very negative for Chinese tickers and also companies involved with China, exporting from China, which in essence affected Tesla to some extent. So this added to some negative pressure for Tesla to some extent. It wasn't really as big for Tesla, it was bigger for like Alibaba, Neo, Xpeng, Li Auto, and these other tickers out there. So that's part of why they ended up selling off. I was hoping Neo would gap up and go because from a fundamental standpoint, their numbers were very good. Okay, they beat expectations for Q4. They did very well, but fundamentals were not everything because politics got in the way alongside regulations. So this was a little bit negative for Tesla. Then we also saw this news. So it wasn't just BBC, it was also Yahoo Finance, Reuters, many other mainstream news outlets came out and they were basically praising BYD and they're criticizing Tesla. They're saying that BYD has overtaken Tesla. They're so much better. They're this and that, and it just really just doesn't make sense to me because, in my opinion, I don't really like comparing them like to this extent. Do you really see mainstream media just constantly comparing, Ford with other companies, their sales with this and that in every single headline? Instead, I think it's very important to appreciate the growth of Tesla. I went over this in a vehicle. I'm sorry, in another video. Sorry about that, guys. And to me, it just doesn't make sense because when you look at their numbers, BYD did 526,000 for battery-only vehicles, which is not bad. But don't forget that they had way more time to develop their manufacturing facilities. BYD has been in the auto business since 2003. Tesla started selling EVs after 2011. So it doesn't make sense to compare them side by side. Instead, we should just appreciate each of them. BYD has good growth. Congratulations to them. Tesla has great growth. Tesla's also a great AI company. It's good for energy storage. Don't forget about Tesla Solar. Don't forget about all these other things that make Tesla great. I don't really like this whole comparison that's being made by mainstream media just to bash Tesla constantly and just to praise, BYD. It just doesn't make sense to me. And, it wasn't just BBC, guys. All these different mainstream outlets were doing it. If you just look up BYD, you're going to see headline after headline after headline that's saying this. And this is what added to the downwards pressure for Tesla. Also, I went over this news earlier, but the news is coming out that now, not all Tesla vehicles are not going to qualify for the $7,500 EV incentive. Down here, we actually have what are still going to qualify for the full tax credit. Some of them are going to qualify for like partial tax credits, but these are the ones that qualify for the full. One variant of the Model 3, the Model X, then all of the Model Ys, they're going to qualify. The rest are not going to qualify for like other variants for the full tax credit. They may qualify for, partial credits and here and there, but this is like a small change that's coming. We'll see how this affects Tesla. This could have also contributed to some downside. Now, when it comes to other pieces of news, volume was about 104 million for Tesla, which is not bad whatsoever, but we ended up selling off. So we saw some buyers still attempting to step in, and yet we didn't get the strongest of volume. On top of all of that, this is not loading, so I'm just going to switch over. Morgan Stanley gave Tesla an overweight rating, but nothing else since. Price-price ratio is dropping a bit. Tesla underperformed just a little bit. Wednesdays are historically green only about 48% of the time, so almost 50-50. And then watch for volatility around noon and around 2 p.m. And sometimes at 3 p.m. there's some volatility Eastern Standard Time. And that's pretty much it. Financials are still very strong for the long term. Tesla is still doing quite well. So with that being said, let's break down the charts now. Let's talk about how things are looking before I conclude this video. So Tesla's in a very, very simple state right now. Basically, we didn't get the catalyst to really help this thing, squeeze to a crazy large extent. Instead, Tesla was just range bound for today, and I think that's going to continue like this until we get a break. So the technicals are very simple. Basically, when you look at Tesla, you want to go to the 4-hour time frame, and this is what I'm going to be watching for tomorrow. We basically have resistance, and I think the resistance is going to be around this green line right here. So this is our 20 EMA. This, in my opinion, is going to retrace towards this 250 area by tomorrow. I think Tesla's going to have resistance at 250 to 252, kind of in that range, but more towards 250. And we're going to have support around 244 at our 4-hour 200 EMA, the red line right here. So basically, Tesla's going to get sandwiched between the EMAs, and it's going to break in one of the directions soon. That's going to determine what the bigger move is going to be. So in essence, I think Tesla's just stuck between 244 to 250, going back and forth and back and forth. It's going to likely continue to do that tomorrow. And then once we get all the data, maybe something else comes out that causes this thing to break out in one direction. That's going to dictate which way Tesla ends up going, because right now it's completely indecisive. It's completely stuck. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, I want to see Tesla close above 250 to turn bullish. If we close above that, we could actually push higher. And if you want to be bearish, you want to see it close below 244. If it closes below that, we could see it drop even more. Until then, we're just stuck between supply and demand, going back and forth and back and forth. So I'm going to actually recolor these so you can see what is supply and what is demand. It's basically very, very simple. This first yellow line, this is going to be our resistance. You guys can see the yellow line right there at this 250 area. This is going to be our key support right about here, very close to this 244 area. This is going to be our support. Tesla's going to likely go back and forth, and then we'll see which way it breaks. This is going to depend on data for tomorrow in the FOMC minutes, but we're just stuck for now, and it's going to likely be stuck for an extended period of time until we get that break. That's what I'm watching for on Tesla. The technicals are just, we got this bullish falling wedge, so we could see it try to break out, but like I said, guys, deliveries ended up being very anticlimactic, so it didn't really give us that break we were looking for. And until then, Tesla's just range bound, and we'll just have to wait and see. SPY is in a different story, however, because we have this trend line that's developing. Basically, I mapped out two possibilities. It's very simple. So we had this rising wedge. I had this drawn out before, but I deleted it just to make the chart simple. Now we're kind of rejecting. So you can see we're kind of rejecting off this yellow trend line. I think we might make an attempt to push up to touch it, and the 473s then reject. So a little pop and drop is very possible unless we break this. If we do end up breaking it like this, then we could try to fill our gap and then reject. So I think we're going to pop and drop, but I'm not sure if we're going to, break out higher first and then drop, or if we kind of like reject off the trend line. That's why we're going to be watching this very carefully. Watch resistance at 473.8 to 474. If that breaks, we have 475, which is where we have our imbalance, and then 476 as resistance. For support, watch 472. That fails us, there's 471.68, followed by 470. And if 470 fails us, we have 468. Look for a little pop and drop. That's going to most likely happen to SPY. We'll see if we break a little higher and then drop or not. But for now, this is the most probable move in my opinion. And that's what I'm seeing as something very likely for the remainder of the week. On the QQQ, it's essentially the same thing. We have resistance around 404. That's going to be a key resistance. Well, we have 403 points, basically 403. Then we have 404.25-ish. Then we have 405.71. Then we have 408 as resistance. For support, watch 402. If that fails us, then we have basically 400, a little bit above 400. 399.64, and then we have 398 and 396.5. So what do I see for the QQQ? I mean, this dropped really hard thanks to Apple and partly thanks to Nvda. So I wouldn't be surprised if it does something very similar to that of SPY. Let me move my chart a bit so you can see this better. See how we have this. We had this basically this rising wedge. I deleted the rising wedge just so that it's very clear for me to make this simple. We had the rising wedge, which led to a break to the downside. And now we have this yellow trend line acting as resistance. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see this thing try to go a little higher tomorrow. We try to hit like 404 or so, and we'll see if we get a big rejection back down to 399. Or if we break this, it could get close to the 406s, kind of like chop around a bit, form like a head and shoulders, and then break down a little bit later on. I find those to be the two most probable outcomes, but I think a pop and drop is very probable, a little test of this level as we dropped very hard without some kind of bounce. So a little bounce before we drop lower is very probable for the QQQ. For Nvda, I think that something very similar is going to happen. Looking at Nvidia, this thing is basically kind of stuck right now. We could even redraw this pennant just a little bit, but we're forming a pennant, a very small looking pennant like this. Going to be looking to see if we get some kind of break. It's starting to look like it might break to the downside, but we'll have to see this tomorrow. Nvidia could sometimes have these fake outs where it just grabs liquidity between 482 to 485, excuse me, and then we reject back down. So some kind of like a tightening of volatility before like a break like this, before we come back down, is also very possible. Or before we break down, we could just go straight down and then ultimately come back down to these levels. So I think Nvidia is going to go lower, but I'm not sure if we kind of break out first and then drop, or if we just drop from here. That depends on which way we break tomorrow, and also on the FOMC minutes and stuff like that. So we'll be watching that very carefully. But that's what I'm seeing for Nvidia. Watch 482, 485, and 488 as resistance. Watch support at 479, 470. Basically for this 476 area, 474.5 and 471.5. We could see a pop and drop or a drop from here, so watch that very, very carefully. On top of all of this, we have Apple stock, In my opinion, Aapl is not looking that great. It dropped really hard without any sort of bounce. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see Aapl try to get back to this liquidity zone. It's a little bit higher if we see Aapl kind of come back up to 186.5. That is a real possibility. We could even use the Fibonacci retracement to draw this out, but I'm not counting on like that big of a bounce yet, which is why I'm not going to talk about that. We could see a back test of this area, could even try to go a little higher to 186 to 188 and reject and just continue lower later on and just continue to fall. Right, very similar to how it tried to break out right here. You guys could see we had this like falling wedge. We did break out just a little bit, but then this move ended up just failing, forming like a head and shoulders for a bigger drop today. So watch for something like this. I find this very probable. Watch 186.5 and 188 as resistance. Watch support at 185 and then 184.25 and 182.5. Pop and drop is very possible, so watch that as well. That's it for my main trading view tickers. Now let's just go over a couple of others very, very quickly. I'm going to try to be fast for this part. So for Rivian, watch for 21.6 to be tested, a little bounce here. If it breaks that, we could see 22, but then a rejection back down to 20. So I think a little pop and drop is coming, 21.6 and back down to 20. And we'll see if the 4-hour 200 EMA holds. If we lose that, expect a bigger drop. So a little pop and drop. I will be watching that as well. For IWM, this is looking bearish as we have a big gap down here to fill. We have this gap down here at 197. We could see this thing kind of pop back up to 200 and reject, make its way back down towards 197. If we end up doing so, we're going to be looking for a double bottom that's forming like right here. So it looks bearish to me overall. It looks bearish. It's getting tight. It could pop a little bit back up to 200 then reject and come back down to like 197. So we'll have to wait and see if that ends up being the case. For Microsoft, we're down 1.3 percent right now. Look and see if we retest 371 to 372. Maybe it goes a little bit higher. It could push just a little bit higher, then come back down to 366. Overall, it looks bearish. It does look bearish. We're going to be watching the 200 EMA as support. If we lose this, we're going to be looking for a bigger drop to like 364. If it holds this, it could try to bounce. So we'll just have to wait and see. So a little pop and drop or back test of the 200 EMA, and we'll see if that holds or not. The 200 EMA is this red line down here. It's a little hard to see. So I think it might pop and then drop back down. We'll see if this holds. If we lose this, we'll turn even more bearish. If it holds, it could hold up for now. I'll have to wait and see tomorrow just to be safe. Don't forget we have the FOMC minutes and such. This looks bearish. AMD looks bearish to me. I think 135 is coming, but it might not go straight down to 135. It might bounce first to 141 to test the 50 EMA and then make its way down towards 135. That's a real possibility, but ultimately it still is bearish. Even if it gets a little pop, it pushes just a couple of points, it's going to ultimately likely come back down, in my opinion. Netflix, this might backtest 143.5, 473.5. Sorry about that, guys. 473.5 could be backtest at the 5 EMA, then a rejection back down to the 200. Now, it's holding the 200 EMA on the 4-hour time frame. If we lose this, we're going to turn even more bearish. So it might test that tomorrow. So watch that carefully. A little pop and drop. We'll see how it reacts to this. Does it bounce and hold this, or does it end up breaking even lower? So I think it might pop and then drop back down towards the red trend line. Do we lose this? If we lose it, we turn bearish. If not, it could just range trade. The VIX is showing some life. It's up about 6%. We'll see if this holds. If the VIX starts pushing higher, this could be because of the market potentially coming back down. The dollar is looking bullish. It looks like it's going to try to get to 102.93, the 4-hour 200 EMA, which suggests that there could be more downside coming. So we'll see if the dollar shoots straight up or if we come back down to 101.6 and then break out. That's going to depend on many different factors. For Coinbase, we're looking bearish overall. It looks bearish overall, but I forgot which time frame this was. Let me just double check this. I think I had to look at the daily chart on this. I could be wrong. Overall, yeah, I'm actually correct. The daily is at the 20 EMA right now on Coinbase. So it's basically at around 155.94. If we lose this, we're going to be looking for a drop all the way down towards, I believe it's 144. That's going to be our next target, 144. If we lose this green line right here, the 20 EMA at 155.94, that's our support right now. If we lose this on daily, it's going to sink more. It looks like it's going to lose it, but watch for confirmation just to be safe. It could kind of like backtest the 160 area, kind of trade sideways first and then end up breaking down to 144. So watch that very carefully. On Google, Google to me looks a little bit bearish, but it's trying to hold the 20 EMA. So it could test 140, reject, and come down to 138.5. And we'll just have to see if that holds. My gut is telling me it's going to break and come down to 136. If it holds that, it's going to be stuck in the 138. If it loses that, it's going to come down to 136. I hope that's as clear as possible. It's going to be this green trend line this green EMA right here. If we lose that, we turn even more bearish. If we hold it, we just trade sideways. Amazon is looking bearish. It's actually a little bit below the 20 EMA. If we lose that, we're going to be watching to see if it could get back above 150. It might try to get back temporarily, but ultimately it looks like it's going to be coming down towards 140, 145. I think that's going to be my target. Might pop first and then come down to 145. I think Amazon has some downside coming. Meta looks bearish, but it hasn't officially broken the 20 EMA to turn super bearish. So watch for a test of 344. If we bounce off of this, we could hold up and we could just trade sideways. If we lose 344, it's going to turn bearish and come down to I think this is 332. This is going to be our next target. It looks bearish on the daily though, if you look at the MACD. So the odds do favor this coming down to 332, but just to be safe, we'll just have to wait and see if it loses the 20 EMA. That's it for this one, guys. Thank you all so much for listening. Please remain calm, cool, and collected. Hopefully this video was very helpful for you guys. If you liked it, please leave a like and a thumbs up and do what you have to do. I thank you all so much. Have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow morning to report some big data that's coming out and more updates on the pre-market. Thank you for listening. Tesla to the moon as the long term is very bright. Don't forget about the range on Tesla that I called out, and we'll just watch and see which way it breaks tomorrow and beyond. Thank you and peace.